In this lecture, we're going to see how to work with attached properties. If you have used QML for a while, you must be familiar with the syntax you see here when you want to know when a certain key has been pressed. And this is known as the keys attached property, which gives your item here the capabilities to know when a certain key on the keyboard was pressed. This is a capability it didn't have natively before, but the keys attached property allows us to have this capability. This is what attached properties are all about, adding features to your item that your item would otherwise never have. In this lecture, we are going to see how we can build such features for our own C++ classes. And what we want to do, we want to add timing features to our QML items, be it our own QML items like the person item here, or the other items that are already available in QML like rectangle here. So how do we do that? Well, there are a few things you need to do. The first thing you need to create is an attached class. The attached class is the class that is going to be the worker, the heavy lifter that provides the feature that you want to add to other classes. If you look in here, you see that it has an interval, it has a running property, and if you look down here, you see that it has a timer. You can see that it has all the fields that allow it to be a timer. And in the demo, we're going to see how exactly all these methods work to provide the timing capabilities for our classes. But what you need to know is that this class is the bulk of your features. It is going to be the class that provides the features that you're going to add to the other classes. But one catcher is that this class is never visible in QML. It is supposed to be in the background working for us, but the user in QML should never see this class. So what class does the user see? They see the attaching class. The attaching class is called to instantiate the attached class, which is the bulk of the features that we want to add to the other QML elements. It really has two requirements. It has to provide the QML attached properties method. And at the bottom, it has to provide this macro here, passing the name of the class in the first parameter and passing QML has attached properties in the second parameter here. You're going to see exactly how this works. Once you define this class, we can go in main and register our types. As we said, the attached class should never be visible in QML. That's why we register it to be uncreatable as you see here. And we register the other classes that we're going to use in QML. Once you have this, you can create a person object, which is a custom item that we defined. You can give it timing capabilities, and it's going to notify you whenever a timer times out. You can also add the same capabilities to a rectangle, and it's going to work exactly the way we expect. Now that you have an idea about this feature, we're going to go to Qt Creator and build it step by step. So here we are in Qt Creator. We're going to create our project. It is going to be a Qt Quick application as usual. It is going to be called Attached Properties Demo. Choose the Qt version, choose the kit we want, and finish. The first thing we want to do is to create our classes that we're going to need. The first one is going to be the person class, which is a custom type we're going to add attached properties to. Let's do that. Person. It's going to inherit QObject. Person is going to have two properties really. Control A, Control I to align. It's going to have a name, which is a string, and an age, which is an integer. We're going to generate the needed methods for this to work. Here we are. We're going to move our fields in the private section of the class. And we want to move these methods to the CPP file. Let's do that. I really wish Qt Creator had a way to do this automatically for all the methods. But again, I am dreaming now. Let's do that for all the other methods. And we do set age right now. What else do we need to do? We need to move the slots in the public section of the class. Control A, Control I to align and remove public slots here. Okay, we have the person class. The next class we want to create is the attached class. Let's do that. It's going to be called timer attached. I love to put the attached suffix to the class that I intend to be an attached class so that I know it exactly when I look at the name. You can choose your own preference. If you don't put attached here, it is still going to work. The class is going to have two properties as well. Control A, Control I to align. We're going to generate the methods. You must be becoming an expert at this already. Let's move our things to the private section of the class. Move our methods to the CPP file. There are a few methods we still need to move. We move interval to the CPP file, and we move running to the CPP file. We want to tidy up our header file. Let's take these slots and move them in the public section of the class. And clean up the class a little bit so that it is presentable. This should be fine. We also want to add a timer because this is going to be counting for us, QTimer. And we need to define a timer object in the private section here, which should say QTimer, pointer timer. Let's go to the CPP file, initialize timer to new timer. The second field is interval. It's going to be 2 seconds, and it is going to start not running. Let's initialize this to false. We want to include QDebug in here and say that we are creating an instance of this class whenever this constructor is called. This is good for debugging purposes. We want to connect to the timeout signal of the timer. We're going to say connect. You already know how to do this. We've done this quite a lot in the course already. We're going to say timer, pound symbol QTimer timeout, and we're going to put in place a Lambda function that is going to respond to this. The Lambda function is going to put out a debug statement saying that we time out for an interval that we have specified. And the timer is going to emit a signal we want to capture in QML whenever we fall here, when it times out. So we're going to go back to the header file and provide another signal. Let's call it void timer out. This is exactly what we want. So we can come back to the CPP file and emit the signal whenever we fall in here. So we're going to say emit timer out. We're going to capture this signal in QML and do something when we get it. Let's correct this a little bit. Okay, and this takes care of our attached class. I want you to think about the usage of this class or its importance. It is a class that is used to provide timing capabilities to other QML components. And when other components instantiate this class, they are going to have access to these properties, interval and running. They are also going to have access to this timer out signal, and they can do something whenever the timer times out. They can also set their own interval or even specify if the timer is running or not running. So these are the features we can provide through attaching to this class. We are going to create our attaching class. It is going to be called timer. Let's do that. Timer. It is going to inherit QObject as usual. Let's go to the header. If you remember, this class has two requirements. One is to implement the QML attached properties method, which is going to return an instance to our attached class, which is timer attached. We should include this class of ours, timer attached. And we should implement this class here, refactor add definition in timer CPP. And all we need to do in here is return an instance of timer attached. So we're going to say return a new timer attached, and we pass in a parent, which is going to be the object here. You can return without passing in a parent, but it is recommended to pass in this object here as a parent, and this is going to be good for memory management for you. Let's go to the header and take care of the other requirement. The other requirement is to put QML declare type info here like this, but you see that this is not recognized. There is an error. What is wrong? For this to work, there's a class that you need to import, and it is QQML.h. Let's do that. Include QQML.h, and as you do that, you see that the error goes away. And this, ladies and gentlemen, takes care of designing attached properties for other types. I want to review what we did here. The person class has no connection whatsoever to timer and timer attached. It is just a custom type that we are going to add an attached property to. Okay, I want you to see that you can do this either on a custom class that you define like person here, or on other QML components like rectangle. What we want to do now is go to main and include our classes. We want to include timer attached. We want to include timer, and we want to include person. We also need to do our registrations. I'm going to do them in a batch to save on typing time here. The timer attached type is exposed to be uncreatable. Okay, you cannot create instances of this, but the timer and the person class can be instantiated anytime. Okay, before we go using the classes in QML, there is one thing we forgot. Let's go back to timer attached and look at when the user sets the running property to running. If the value passed in here is true, we should start the timer if it's not running. And if the value is false, we should stop the timer if it's running. We should implement that logic. After we set the running property, we should say if the timer is not running now, we should say mtimer stop to stop it, else we should start it. Now I think we're ready to go to QML and do our imports. Let's check main again to see what we should import. We should import timing 10 and people 10. Let's do that. Import (1.0), import 1.0. And if we go down here, we can put in a person object, person element. The name can be Johnson. And the age is going to be, let's do 33. And we can say something like timer running, set this to true, timer interval is going to be 3000 for 3 seconds, and timer on timer out, we're going to put in a block that is going to say console log timer out for person. Let's run. Okay, you see that it is timing out every 3 seconds. Is this every 3 seconds? And if you notice, the timer is going pretty fast, and it is going pretty fast because we forgot to pass in the interval in here. So let's say interval. We should also go to QML and change a few things. We want this to run every 2 seconds. Let's run the application. Okay, you see timer for person in 2 seconds, and this is working exactly the way we want. I want to show you that we can also do the same thing for another component. I'm going to copy this, create a rectangle, pretty quick rectangle. ID is going to be mrect. The width is going to be 200. The height is going to be 200 as well. The color is going to be yellow, green. And I want to put in my timer attached property. We should say timer out for rect. And let's make this a 5 just to make it different a little bit. We should see 2 messages for instantiating a timer attached property. And this is what we have here. And we have timers timing out for 2 seconds and 5 seconds simultaneously. And this is really how you build attached properties features to your own C++ types. You have to provide the attached type, which is really a class that has your features that you want to expose. And you have to provide an attaching class that has to fulfill 2 requirements, providing this static method, also adding this macro here. And for this macro to work, you have to include QQMLH. The rest is really going to main and registering your types. The timer attached property should never be visible to the user. That's why we register it as uncreatable. And the rest is really all you see here. We import the types and we use the attached property like we would for any attached property you have used in QML. This is all for this lecture. In the next one, we're going to see how to work with property value sources. I'll see you in the next lecture.